All right, first off, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Stone. Salutations to the Akim out there pushing this word, now sincerity and now truth, the hopeful elect. All right, this lesson is going to be based upon Deuteronomy 23, verse 17. All right, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor sodomite of the sons of Israel. All right, I just want to look up, the word whore and the word sodomite there. To see if I can, bring out some edification as to what the word actually means, right? Because, colloquially or culturally or even more popularly, a sodomite is referred to as a homosexual, specifically, a homosexual man, but it can be used to, refer to a homosexual female or just homosexual in general. That's how we use it in the English context. But the Hebrew word here, which is translated to sodomite and to whore in this verse, is actually a little bit different from that. Right? So let's get into the Hebrew. So the Hebrew there is actually kodash, which we know the root of a root word. Kodash. It actually means holy or sacred or set apart, right? And the female version, whore, is kodasha, which makes it female or feminine. And it says from age 6942, right, a sacred person, technically a male devotee by prostitution to licentious idolatry or sodomite, unclean, right? And then it says a male temple prostitute. And when you go into the Hebrew word for the word whore, it says a female temple prostitute, right? And if you go down to the Genesis lexicon, it says a sodomite properly consecrated, which is why it goes back to Kodash, because they are consecrated prostitutes to Astarte or Ashtoreth, which is the queen of heaven from Babylonian time, or Venus, which I believe is the Roman equivalent or is it the Greek equivalent, one of the two, and prostituting himself in her honor, right? So he said, as to the libidinous worship of Venus among the Babylonians, right? So it's actually talking about a male or female that prostitutes him or herself in honor of the goddess Astarte, which is the same thing as the goddess Ashtoreth or Venus, right? Now, if you go into the same Deuteronomy 23, if you go down to verse 28, 23, verse 18, Salakia, it says, "Thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord thy God for any vow, for even both of these are an abomination to the Lord thy God." And if you look up the word hire of a whore, right, the word there is zana, right? And zana means an actual whore that commits adultery, right? So regular whore. So you can't bring a regular whore into the house of the Lord. So there's actually a different Hebrew word here for whore, right? Let's see if we can go into it just to get the verification. So zana, it says a primitive root, usually of the female, less often of simple fornication or involuntary ravishment. To commit fornication, to be a harlot, to play the harlot, to be a harlot, to act as a harlot, commit fornication, commit adultery, to be a cult prostitute, to cause to commit adultery, to force into prostitution, and to commit fornication. So this is the general term for a whore. But if you look up the word dog there, so it says or the price of a dog, the Hebrew word is kalab, right? But in this sense, it's used. It says from an unused root, which means to yelp or else to attack a dog, semicolon, a dog, hence by euphemism, which a euphemism is pretty much it says a mild or indirect word for expression substituted for one considered to be too harsh or blunt when referring to something unpleasant or embarrassing. So it's a nicer way to say a male prostitute, right? So in this sense, in Deuteronomy 23 and verse 18, right, it was actually used as a euphemism for a male prostitute, right? That's what it's used for here in this sense, right? So if we go back to the verse, it says, "Thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore," which is a normal whore, not one that is consecrated to Astarte or Ashtoreth or Venus, but a regular harlot, or the price of a dog, which is a male harlot or a male prostitute, not necessarily one who was consecrated himself to a god or a goddess in the house of the Lord thy God for any vow, for even both they are an abomination to the Lord thy God, right? And then we can get more understanding if we go to 2 Kings chapter, the 23rd chapter, right? And this is talking about King Josiah, or Josiah, if I'm not mistaken. It says, and the king sent, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem. And the king went up into the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with them, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. He read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord. And the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord, to walk after the Lord, and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people stood to the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest and the priests of the second order and the keepers of the door to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal and for the grove and for the host of heaven. And he burned them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and carried the ashes unto Bethel. And he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the places round about Jerusalem, them also that burn incense unto Baal, the sun and the moon and the planets and all the hosts of heaven. And he brought out the grove, from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem and the brook Kidron, unto the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron, and stamped it small to powder, and cast powder thereof upon the graves of the children of the people. Right? And here's the point here. He says, and he brake down the house of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the grove. Now, if you look up that word for Sodomites there, it's the same word, Quadasha, right? Which is talking about the prostitutes that were consecrated to Astarte. And a matter of fact, if you go down to the word grove, right? To the word grove here, and it was actually mentioned in a couple of verses above as well, right? It's Asherah, right? Asherah. And it Strong's Info says it's come from the root, which means happy, right? And it's in this context, it means Astarte, which we read about in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 17, a Phoenician goddess, also an image of the same, right? So it's talking about Asherah, groves for idol worship, a Babylonian Canaanite goddess of fortune and happiness, right? Which is Astarte, which is exactly what we read about in Deuteronomy chapter 23, right? So it was forbidden for the children of Israel to prostitute themselves in the name of this goddess, or any god or goddess, or to prostitute themselves any at all, which you saw in verse 18, right? Because verse 18 talks about the regular whore and the regular male prostitute, and verse 17 talks about those who prostitute themselves in the name of a god or goddess, right? Now there's an article I want to, matter of fact, no, it's 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 9, we can bring out as well to get up some more edification on the same point. It says, know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind. Now if you look up that word for effeminate, right, let's go down, malakos, right? Alright, so the word malakos means of uncertain affinity, soft, i.e. fine clothing, figuratively, a catamite, right? And if you look up the word catamite, it means a boy kept for homosexual practices, right? A boy kept for homosexual practices, which, is why the word sodomite, started to take on that the homosexual vibe. And really and truly, the Canaanites were into homosexuality too, which is why Sodom and the 5 cities thereof, got destroyed as well, right? So this part says the outline of Bible usage: soft to the touch, metaphor in a bad sense, effeminate, a boy kept for homosexual relations with a man, of a male who submits his body to unnatural lewdness of a male prostitute, right? So in the Old Testament as well as the New, right, it forbids, male prostitutes, right? But in this case also it specifies being a homosexual, right? In this case it specifies being a homosexual as well, right? So let's get to the article. So it pronounces it Kedesha in the article, temple prostitute. It says Kedesha, also spelled Kedesha or Kedesha, Akkadian Quadeshtu, one of a class of sacred prostitutes found throughout the ancient Middle East, generally in the worship of the fertility goddess Astarte or Ashtoreth, which Easter is named after. You know, prostitutes who often played an important part in official temple worship could either be male or female. In Egypt, a goddess named Kodeshu, Lady of Kadesh, was worshipped in the 19th and 20th dynasties. Her representation is found on private stelae of middle-class workers. She is shown nude, posing frontally on a lion, holding arrows in her hands. Although Israelite prophets and reformers repeatedly denounced sacred prostitution, the early Israelites seem to have adopted the local Canaanite rites, which they apparently practiced publicly until the reform of King Josiah, which we read about in 2 Kings, the 23rd chapter, about 621 BC. Right? So, the last part I wanted to bring out is the fact that women nowadays who preach or who support this sexual we call it now sexual liberation, right, and their sexual rights to sleep with whoever and however many guys they want to, right, is actually under the same vibration, right, because they used to do it in celebration of the fertility goddess Ashtoreth, right? But these women are doing it to what? Just to enjoy the pleasures of it, yo. Right? Just to enjoy the pleasures of it, right? Which are coming under the same vibration, yo. Right? So that's pretty much what I wanted to bring out. You know, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 17, right? You know, he's talking about temple prostitutes, right? Shalom.